Jay here, Stretford, Paddock. That's Joe Smith, and this is a look at everyone's favourite Belgian goalkeeper, probably the best Belgian goalkeeper, in my opinion, Senne Lammens, who, fresh off an outstanding performance at Goodison Park, has been getting his flowers, hasn't he? Everyone's praising him, everyone's going, oh, what a great game, how good is he? And we thought, actually, let's have a little wider look at the entire season since he arrived at Manchester United, what it's been like, what he's achieved, how good he has been, what you think his strengths are, any weaknesses you might have noticed. So we thought we'd get into it. First of all, Joe, how are we?
I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah.
Really excited about this. Excited about him as a player, what he brings to the team, and also what he represents as a signing as well. I think across the board is absolutely phenomenal, Senne Lammens.
I agree, and I think that we're going to get into stats and facts and figures, which you have to with anything like this. But there isn't a stat for bringing calmness to the team. There isn't a stat for making the defenders feel more confident. There isn't a stat for settling the crowd's nerves. No. Because before we get into Lammens, if we can just cast our minds back to beginning of the season with Ollie Bayern, last season and the beginning of this season for the Grimsby game with Andre Onana, I mean, it was difficult, wasn't it?
It's amazing. Like you said, obviously there's no stat for it, and people want everything to be able to be boiled down into a stat because it's, you know, you can write it down, you can tweet it very easily, you can bring it up on a graphic on Monday Night Football. But there's a lot of things that just simply cannot be put into stats. And the difference in demeanour, or aura, as people might say these days, between an Onana and between a Bayern is absolutely night and day. Like when you watch Lammens compared to those guys, you're watching different brains entirely. I mean, obviously they are, but you wouldn't think they are playing the same position for the same club. You know, Lammens looks calm and measured and controlled, and he makes everyone sort of take a breath out. The other two make you sort of hold your breath and panic. And what does that do, as like you said, as a fan base, as a defence in front of him, as a midfield, as an opposition? Let's not forget, the amount of times where you've seen opposition players talk about our goalkeeper, or you can see from the way they're playing, they are targeting certain things about our goalkeepers. It's all of those things that you can't write down, as I said before. It's phenomenal. It's so weird as well. Like, you don't even think it's just his personality, isn't it? Yeah. It's not even him as a keeper. It's just what he's like. Like he's got a very orthodox sort of diving style and the way he moves his body. And we spoke about this with Onana when he arrived. He looks a bit weird. The way he dives and the way he runs and the way he pushes off and the way he kicks the ball is a bit odd. So straight away you're going, right, there's something not right there. There's something that makes me think I can get at him. Whether it's true or not, this perception develops around a player and you go, no, there's a crack there, there's something that's going on. With Lammens, he has made the odd little flicker of a mistake where he might misplace a pass, or maybe could have got a little bit closer to one or two of the goals he's conceded, very, very few. But you never think that's going to cascade into half a dozen, 2 dozen mistakes over the next couple of months. And that's the difference. That's such a massive thing. It's like I said, all you can do is observe it and talk about it. You can't boil it down to a number. But it makes such a big difference, just fundamentally, what you think about when you think about Lammens. Before we get into the numbers, and the numbers are exceptional as well. But yeah, it's just his personality, isn't it? There's nothing else to say about it. There's no way to kind of break it down. He's very calming. He calms everyone around him. And when he makes a mistake, so far at least, he doesn't let it affect him. He doesn't then panic and spiral. It's a brilliant foundation point for a goalkeeper. Like if you're a goalkeeper coach and you've got two young 14, 15-year-old keepers in front of you, one of them has got a personality like Lammens and one has got a personality like, let's say Onana. I don't want to consistently dig him out, but you would go, actually, I'd rather be a defender in front of this guy. Yeah. Because it's completely different. They could be the exact same keeper. It just feels more comfortable. You feel more relaxed. You feel safer playing in front of Lammens, and that's a massive, massive thing. That.
No, 100%. I mean, we saw it pretty much consistently since Bayern arrived. We'll just talk about Bayern and Onana briefly before we move on, because I don't want to sort of labour the point, but Bayern, in all honesty, I think almost every game there was something that went on with him where you were like, whoa. There was a moment, we saw it in the Arsenal game, obviously that was a big moment because it ended up conceding a goal. Even the Fulham game where he wasn't necessarily at fault for their goal, he was running around his box every time a cross came in, he just looked all at sea. I remember St James's Park, I think it was last season, where he kicks the ball at one of their players, and I know you could say, well, Lammens did something similar, but it wasn't as obvious as that one. And there was always like a drama, a calamity going on. Andre Onana, the Grimsby game was as bad as he's been, to be honest with you, at fault for both the goals against Leeds opposition. But there's also other games where the only reason Bayern managed to get himself into that position of being number one was because Andre Onana kept having games where the manager was like, what's going on here? Like, what are you doing? I keep going back to the FA Cup final at Wembley, even though we won. He let them back in that game with that Jeremy Doku goal that should never have been a goal.
It's near post.
Yeah, it was just so easy for a goalkeeper of that quality. And Andre Onana came with a big reputation. He'd won, been to a Champions League final. All the sort of accolades that come with that. He played very well in that final against Manchester City, but he never really got going. And similarly with Bayern, he always looked like he had one in him. And you can't have two goalkeepers like that.
No.
These are the two worst goalkeepers that have been 1 and 2 in my lifetime as a Manchester United fan. Now that might sound harsh, and I've not anything against them personally. I've met them, they were nice gentlemen, and very friendly when my kids got to meet them. But let's be honest about their footballing abilities. You might go, oh, Jay, what about Tim Howard and Roy Carroll or whatever? They were both more reliable than them two for Manchester United. So it had to change. Before we get into stats, Senne Lammens comes in. At one point, it looks like we're going to get Emi Martinez. There's talk that, are we going to try and go toe-to-toe with Manchester City for Donnarumma? We don't. We get Senne Lammens in. I think Scholesy was a bit hesitant about this. He wasn't alone. I'm just singling him out, but there was other pundits that were like, this kid can't come in and be number one for Manchester United. What were your initial thoughts when we were linked with him and then we got him?
I always think goalkeeper's a weird one because I do think you grow into it as a position, and famously keepers flourish a little bit later, although as years go by that seems to have got younger and younger and younger, doesn't it? Keepers don't tend to peak in their 40s anymore or in their sort of late 30s anymore, the way they did maybe 20, 30 years ago. I think there is more physically demanding, more demanding in a footballing sense as well. You're expected to have anywhere between 30 and 60 touches of the ball a game. You can't be out of shape with bad knees, a little bit overweight like you could in the 90s. As you see, I think Ederson's only 32, 33 and he looked way past it, didn't he? Only the real great, likes of Neuer, etc., keep playing until they're 30 or 40. So I think that 23, whilst it is very young, isn't as young as it once was for a keeper. So I was never that sort of, oh no, he can't do it. He's only, if he was 16, 17, you might think it's a bit young. But I think with a goalkeeper, like we said, so much of it comes down to your presence. And, let's be honest, it's very rare that a goalkeeper comes along that has sort of superhuman athleticism. I think for a while De Gea had it. I used to watch De Gea and think, I've never seen anyone make these saves this consistently before. But it's not like you're waiting for a sort of mega athlete to come along that can jump higher and further and quicker than everyone else. Most of goalkeeping is just about consistency, isn't it? Occasionally a keeper comes along that's so brilliant with their feet that they change the game a little bit. Coming back to Ederson, he was one that felt like that, didn't he? But, most weeks, like you said about Tim Howard, for most weeks of the season, Tim Howard was roughly as good as a Van der Sar or a Schmeichel. But it's those 5 or 6 weeks a season where they aren't that makes the difference between a good keeper and a great keeper.
I agree with that.
Most keepers can make most of the saves most of the time, is my point. The exceptional ones do that more often and more consistently than anyone else. Van der Sar in particular, probably the most consistent goalie I've ever seen in my life.
I agree with that, 100%.
And he didn't do it by being able to reach further in the corner than everyone else or being able to kick it more consistently or further than anyone else. He did it by doing the right things every single time over and over and over again. And that's what we're seeing from Lammens. So yes, because he's young and he's come from a smaller league, there would be doubts, but you don't have, other than maybe the physicality that we've seen over the last game or two, there's not that much of a difference in a goalkeeper's job from league to league. No. You still have to stop the ball, you have to get in the way of it, and you have to be consistent. So I was never that worried. My bigger worry was that I hadn't seen enough of him. I didn't know if he was that good. But I knew that if he was, that should translate to the Premier League, because you don't seem to have that league struggle when you get goalies coming from other leagues, because the job is largely the same. And with Martinez, I think we both felt similar, didn't we, where he is, look at him most weeks, he's pretty good. But what separates him from being in that kind of Van der Sar top keeper category, despite winning a World Cup, is 6-7 weeks of the season, he fucks it up. like we saw in the last day of the season at Old Trafford. He cost them a Champions League place by getting sent off.
I mean, there was no need for him to do what he did, fouling Rasmus Højlund. No. He could have stayed on his line, or he could have tried to make a tackle. He just flew into him.
Yeah.
It was like the worst thing you can possibly do in this scenario. He did it, and as you rightly pointed out, ends up costing Aston Villa a Champions League spot. Now, there were rumours and reports that Ruben Amorim favoured Emi Martinez, and I've been semi-critical of Jason Wilcox on this channel in the past. I'm like, is he all cracked up here? That is meant to be? Is his, this reputation, is it quite good enough to be the main man at Manchester United? But I do have to give him some credit, because I think it was Tony Coton who was at United. I think he was our only signing in the 95-96 season.
Really?
Yeah, the season where we won the double.
That.
We sold it into Kanchelskis and Mark Hughes. The player we brought in was Tony Coton for £500,000. Can you imagine the social media outrage if we did that?
Is that we're just going to trust all these kids?
We're getting rid of three of our best players, and we're going to buy City's goalkeeper as our reserve keeper.
Yeah.
That was what we did. So Tony Coton, he knows the club. He was at the club as a coach as well. Yeah. He recommended him. I think Jason Wilcox almost overruled the manager and went with Senne Lammens, who's come in, and like I said earlier, Donnarumma was one go at City, people moaning the winning game, but Lammens came in with a lot of expectation, or a lot of pressure on him, I should say.
Yeah.
Only about 18 million quid, I think it was, so a bit of a bargain. Comes in and was Sunderland the first game. Almost immediately shows what he's about, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's got. We've talked about the calmness, we've talked about the consistency so far, but we talked that consistency. It's 21 games he's been here.
Yeah,
he's lost 2 of them. Like, obviously, that's most. Not all on the keeper by any means. You put, like I said, Neuer or Van der Sar or Schmeichel in. Sheffield Wednesday's goal this season, they're still getting relegated. So It's not all on the goalkeeper. But he plays a part, and he certainly plays a part that we've seen more clean sheets. I think 5 clean sheets in that time that have been quite sort of recent as well. We've had, I think, 3 in the last 6 or 7 games. But he claims the ball well, he passes the ball well, he stops shots. Like, we've got some stats and numbers. I think he's 5th or 4th in total for goals prevented, which is sort of a cumulative XG that he's stopped compared to what he's let in. But in terms of goals prevented per 90 minutes, which for me is a more important stat, because the other one is skewed by how many games you played, he prevents the most expected goals per 90 minutes of any keeper in the league.
That's like you said, that's the best stat to look at.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I know that he kicked the ball against, was it
Barry?
Yeah, Barry yesterday. But realistically, the number of sort of passing errors that he's made, or sort of worrying ones, you can count on one hand in those 20 games. Like, he wasn't brought in as a passing keeper, but his passing range is very good. He never looks nervous on the ball. He looks very composed and controlled. And also the high claims and that other side to him. And I was talking about this with McCullough on Uncensored, but go back to De Gea, one of his weaknesses was his claiming of the ball in the box and sort of that box sort of marshalling that people talk about. So I would say that game against Everton, where I think 6 crosses that were claimed or punched in that game, and obviously they're not just normal crosses where you've got loads of space and you're coming out, and they are 15 players or 10 players around him having to come through or catch him. I mean, that's as good a sort of box control aerially performance that we've seen from a United keeper since probably Van der Sar was here. It's unbelievable.
It is, and I think you can sort of point towards the struggles that De Gea had with how more prevalent that became in the English game.
Yeah,
players getting in the box for corners and getting in the keeper's way, and it became a real thing, didn't it? Sort of around the late sort of 2010s.
Yeah.
We saw more and more of it, and De Gea struggled with that element of the game. He was very good at shot stopping. His distribution at times could let him down, but certainly crosses and just being commanding his area was his one flaw. Even when he was getting in the Premier League Team of the Year and winning the Player of the Year awards at United, it was one flaw he had that people went, well, he's sort of 10 out of 10 for everything else, so you can forgive him for being 4 or 5 out of 10 for this. Whereas Senne Lammens, who's had to deal with this, he deals with it superbly. And Everton was a great example. You've got James Tarkowski just constantly on you. You've got other players getting in your face, all the rest of it, that Armstrong and 1 or 2 others. And he managed it well. And what impresses me about Senne Lammens, he reminds me a little bit of Edwin van der Sar is he doesn't do the spectacular unless he needs to. There was an element, I think there's this new thing with all goalkeepers. I've noticed it. I used to think it was like just Joe Hart that did it a few years ago. But I've noticed it like, Aaron Ramsdale's the obvious one where the ball's straight at him and he'll move to the side and punch it upwards.
Yeah.
And then you'll have people doing memes of like, he's not human. And you're like, well, he is. He could have just stood there and caught it.
If he hadn't moved out the way of that shot so he could dive back to it, then it would have looked a lot more human.
I see it a lot with goalkeepers, and this performative, like Dean Henderson, who's a good goalkeeper, performing, and we saw it with Jordan Pickford yesterday against Everton, when we played Everton, where he's cheering and screaming, and there's just that element, not just the spectacular saves, but also the performative element. He's just a bit more robotic, innit? And there's a time when I've seen him catch shots that I know most goalkeepers in the Premier League would have punched because it looks better. And I think, well, what is better for the team? Keeping possession and catching it, or punching it and maybe giving away a corner, or it going to a striker or whoever and giving the opposition a chance of scoring. He does it very well, and Van der Sar used to do that. He used to do that all the time. He'd always do the sort of make it look simple and easy because his positioning was so good. And I think there's definitely an element of Senne Lammens. If we're going to be sort of look at the rough stuff as well, what areas do you think he could improve on? Because we're all loving him. He's been mint. 2 defeats in his entire, in the Premier League in his entire United career is just ridiculous so far, to be honest with you. It's 21 games. The stats against Everton were amongst some of the best we've seen from a goalkeeper this season from any team. What do you think is something where you go, okay, maybe we can work on this, maybe this can get a little bit better?
I think there seems to be an element of, the sort of longer range shots across the body that we've conceded a few of, the Morgan Rogers ones. There's a couple of others as well where it's sort of edge of the box across him, high up, maybe getting his hands sorted, getting off quickly. I don't know whether his sort of quick reactions for big dives are necessarily that top De Gea. Well, I mean, like I said, De Gea is probably the best I've ever seen at that, so maybe it's unfair to compare him. But, getting your feet sorted and really springing off, because he's big and he's tall, that can sometimes limit your actual athleticism. But none of it is to a point, or I don't see that to a point where it's a real problem. It's not like someone who I think, someone like Raya, who I think consistently over time has struggled against long-range shots, despite being, I think, a top-class keeper, Raya. I don't see it as that kind of an issue. And again, he's not probably world-class with the ball at his feet. He's not one of the best I've ever seen with the ball at his feet. But I think when you look at the sort of the overall picture, when the ball's at his feet, I'm not worried, and most of the time it works out pretty well. When teams are taking long-range shots, there's a couple against Everton where, the Michael Carrick one, for instance, another one where he didn't catch it, but he sort of got there comfortably and thought, actually, if I catch this, it's just, I'm risking too much to try and
you've got to be careful with that.
And he palms that one over because
that can be counterproductive.
That made sense. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's any glaring weaknesses.
No,
I think
I'm not
maybe there's a few areas where he's 6.5, 7 out of 10. And then a few areas where he's 8.5, 9, 9.5 out of 10. And for me, if you can be that well-rounded, plus have a few areas where you're genuinely exceptional, I would take that over someone that's got 10 out of 10 in diving and saving, like De Gea, for instance, but then maybe they've got 3, 4 out of 10 in terms of other areas. I think a well-rounded keeper with some exceptional qualities is exactly what United need, and maybe more so than other clubs, because I don't think we tolerate big gaffes the way that other clubs do. Emi Martinez, for instance, players, if our goalkeeper comes out and gets sent off, once people go, hang on a sec, twice, get him out of the club. Social media is rife with it. Carragher's loving it. You've got the whole, team on Sky Sports News tearing into him. You can already imagine what Richard Keys has got to say. So we almost need a keeper more than everyone else that just does the right thing more often than not. And I think that's what it seems like Lammens is. He's a consistency machine, and that's exactly what we need.
Incidentally, Big Gaffs was the original title for MTV Cribs.
Was it?
Yeah.
The English Manchester version?
Yeah, Big Gaffs.
You were going to host that, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. Big Gaffs in that. Look at this.
What size is that?
They went with MTV Cribs. I just want to talk about... Sorry, go on. I thought I interrupted you.
No, go on.
Obviously, under Michael Carrick, let's face facts, right? Senne Lammens has done well since he arrived at United.
Yeah.
When he first came in, we won 3 on the row for the first time under Ruben Amorim in the Premier League. Not a coincidence. And then I think we went 5 games unbeaten, so you got to give him credit for that. We're obviously in this unbeaten run here. We've got some of the ratings that he's got. I know this isn't scientific, but it's a pretty decent way of looking at how effective and how well he's been performing. And if you can look there for Manchester City. I think this is from where we're getting these ratings from FOTMob, average ratings. So if you want to read out those ratings, Joe.
It's 7.8, 8.2, 8.2, 7.8, 7.1, 8.5, and this is what I mean. It's just consistent all the time.
Even if you go, I don't know about, it can't be a million miles away. It shows the consistency. It's not a coincidence that we're winning pretty much nearly all of these games, and there's a couple of clean sheets in there as well. So, look, I mean, I think there's 3 clean sheets. I'm doing him a disservice. So he's obviously playing his part in important wins and obviously a draw at West Ham, and he's kept us in a few games as well. Even games where we were struggling. There's been a few games, the games under Ruben Amorim, where we were disappointed with the draw, where he's stopped it being a defeat. So you've got to give him credit there. And what impresses me the most about Senne Lammens is he's come in at a pretty weird time to come in as a Manchester United player. He's already had 3 managers. He's been here for less than a season. I've 3 managers already. United have been a little bit up and down. There's been a lot going on off the pitch and on the pitch, of course, as well. And he's hit the ground running. I've seen goalkeepers. You mentioned David De Gea quite a few times, who came into a very good team with a very good defence in front of him and the greatest manager the world's ever seen, and struggled in his first season. He struggled in his first 2 seasons. I know he won his title in the second season, whatever it was. But there was a time when it was like, was it Anders Lindegaard was getting swapped with him, and Fergie even criticised him after the game once. It was like Gary Neville was laying into him. I think after the game at White Hart Lane, there was like, hang on a minute, is this guy all he's cracked up to be? It can be difficult for a young goalkeeper coming into Manchester United. I think Gary Neville said it's probably the hardest job in football in terms of a position and going into a club is being goalkeeper for Manchester United. So I think you've got to give this youngster credit for that, to go from Royal Antwerp to Manchester United, put the numbers, the ratings, the performances he's put up on the board. It's just unreal almost. It's just so good. And I think we've all got to breathe a massive sigh of relief, because if it's not him, it's going to be one of the goalkeepers we've criticised. It would have been Andre Onana or Ali Bayandé, and I just don't think that works. I think it's obvious it doesn't. And with a bit of luck, we can have Senne Lammens in goal for us for many years to come. Just
one other thing I want to mention as well, and I completely agree with that, is if you sort of zoom out a little bit and look at him as a transfer, he is the exact sort of transfer that for years us as United fans have been desperate for. It's a youngster that... Had you ever heard of him?
No.
I'd never heard of him. I know that obviously he's playing for a big team, so I'm sure some people will have heard of him over in Belgium. But he's a very unknown player. He's on about 60 grand a week. He cost 18 million quid. And he's come in and he's been fantastic. He's the sort of player that usually... Instead of him coming to United, he'd go to Brighton or he'd go to Brentford or he'd go to Bournemouth, and we would be looking at him this summer for 50, 60, 70 million quid.
100%.
He's the exact sort of signing that we don't make as Manchester United, but actually, increasingly so, with the likes of Patrick Dorgu as well, and with the likes of Senne Lammens, United are making a bit more of these signings now under Ineos and Wilcox and Coton and Vivell and all these other guys that are working on the transfer side of things. But for me, he's a fantastic sort of test or case sample that United are doing transfers a little bit differently than we have been, and can be successful as well. Because for 18 million quid and less than 100 grand a week wages, pound for pound, he's probably the best goalkeeper in the league. No one is doing what he's doing for the fee and for the wages that he's doing it for. So it's been a phenomenal signing so far. Obviously, there's still 10 games of the season to go or thereabouts, but you can't ask for any more from a club perspective, from a goalkeeping perspective, and then from a results perspective. It's been a perfect signing so far.
It has been a perfect signing so far. Get involved in the chat in the comments and let us know what you think of Senne Lammens. How impressed have you been with him this season? Do you see any flaws or any worries that you might think he needs to work on? Or are you just thinking that this is a guy who is almost perfect? Make sure you check out Joe on the Sloppy Joe's podcast. Don't forget as well to check out the merchandise. There's a link in the description for that. That's been Joe Smith. I've been Jay Moy. This has been a look at everyone's favourite Belgian, Senne Lammens. Thanks for watching.